I guess first a little bit of background on Dart. It's a Google language, basically. Most of the people that are contributing to it are Google engineers. The kind of goal is to make JavaScript, replace JavaScript with a different language. And the reason why they want to do this is it's becoming very difficult for them to have many people working on the same JavaScript project. As you all know, well, some of you know, JavaScript's dynamically typed, so it's kind of hard to create an IDE that is very intelligent about what's going on. So we're going to jump, let's see. This is about the guy's slides. So one of the things that he likes about Dart is basically being able, like intelligent IntelliSense, if you're familiar with Visual Studio or Eclipse, like autocomplete. Dart is, their current IDE is built in, it's built off of Eclipse, so they've kind of brought over a lot of the tooling from Java development and making that easy. And if you're familiar with JavaScript, these are some complaints about JavaScript. I mean, the counterpoint is you can make the same kind of jokes about like MySQL comparing to Postgres and things like that. So you know, everything has its warts, but JavaScript can catch you. It can catch you with all sorts of issues that for someone that's a novice at JavaScript, they're not really used to encountering, and they'll sit there debugging code, and then they'll learn a lesson, and then they'll move on. This is another example here. If you guys have any questions, interrupt me, or if I'm wrong about anything, interrupt me too. This is I don't know, this guy's complaining about MooTools. I've never used MooTools, so blast right through it. So this is one of the big slides about Dart. They talk about how you have these languages, you have libraries, you have good tooling. They call it batteries including, that's what they refer to tooling, that you know you can start working in it now. It's not like a research language that you can write code and you can compile it, but you don't have a good IDE to play with it. You don't have a good way to debug it. Well, Dart has all these great ways to debug, and you can basically, Chromium will run the Dart VM right now, and you can take Dart code, you can compile it, you can run on the VM in Chromium, or for the end user right now, you can compile it to JavaScript. You can actually deploy it and run it in the real world. When you're debugging the Chromium IDE with the VM, you can actually get stack traces. You can do all the normal stuff you'd see in Java. You put breakpoints and view memory locations.
Do you have to do the special Dartium browser, or it runs in Chromium now?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chromium, yeah. It runs in Chromium. You have to use their special sauce, their special tooling that comes down. You can, I've argued with people on the mailing list, and they've told me, well, because I put bugs in the mailing list and argued with some of their developers over things, and they do say you can compile it yourself and do all that. I haven't gone through that procedure. But of course the big thing is, edit refresh. So basically you can change your code, just like PHP, and hit save, and then you can see it live on your browser. So you have this very fast iterative cycle for coding. It's very live. And deploy it to JavaScript and run in most browsers today. But you guys are probably aware of some of the alternatives. GWatt. Michael has a lot of experience. I don't know if anyone's used CoffeeScript or Clojure, the Clojure compiler, things like that. So here's some of the code. So here's a simple constructor, X, Y. This is like syntactical sugar. Makes it very easy to do things. And the string method is also very easy to do toString. These are things I sort of enjoy. That this basically this equal sign arrow. That basically is like a one-line method, basically. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, there's all these different rules about equal signs, using like 3 equals and all these different rules. It's very similar, just like basically Java when you're writing in Dart, if you're familiar with the different equal signs meanings. So of course, it does this correctly, this little piece of code that would not work in JavaScript.
Slow down a little bit.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of slides. Oh, I have maybe 50 slides of this, and I have some examples to go through. If I have more time. Go ahead.
Google GWT also
Yep.
comes from Google, and Dart is coming from Google. I mean, you said GWT is an alternative for Dart. Does that mean Google is pushing both technologies, or at one time?
Google's actually pushing a lot of different technologies. They've been doing like this Angular JavaScript on one side, they've been doing Polymer on another side. GWatt is a little bit more older, and there's tons of things that run GWatt now, but I think they more have let GWatt go on its own for whatever reason. I think they're trying to.
Why do you say GWatt?
I don't know, what is the correct term?
A lot of people call it GWT or
GWT? Okay.
GWT.
I'm sorry, yeah, GWT. Yeah.
Quick question. Is this intended just for the front end, or is it also?
So there are people that want to run it in the back end and compete with Node.js, and that is one of the goals, and there are people that do that today. There isn't like, it's kind of new, you know, it's like in the first year. I mean, that is definitely one of their goals for people to do in the back end and in the front end. They're really pushing it more in the front end for their stuff. You know, Google is not planning on running, I don't think they're planning on running Dart for their back ends. Most of their back ends are Java or C++, but you know, everything front end right now is basically JavaScript, so.
Gary?
Yeah.
This might be a silly question, but do you ever mix Angular and Dart?
Yeah, there is a project, Angular.Dart. It's like maybe a month old that they've gone live,
So
where you
both
can mix
of them
them, yeah. I don't see a ton of advantages to that route. There's also, you know, Dart's really pushing Polymer also. And I'm not going to go into Polymer as much because I haven't really used Polymer myself, but Polymer is like this JavaScript library that we've had presentations on before, but with all these different components, you piece them together. A lot of people doing Dart, that's what they use. They use these Polymer components, and that's...
So Polymer is more popular than Angular for mixing with
Right now, yes,
Dart.
I would say that. Polymer is more important. There's a lot more activity in the mailing list in that regard. The Angular stuff, there's a lot of things people like about Angular, and they're both going toward the same direction. I would say the Polymer has been worked on more, and it has more feature on the front page. On the actual website, Dart.lang is the main website, and they actually talk about a lot of their Polymer integrations. I didn't prepare to talk about Polymer because it's been constantly changing, but like as soon as like maybe like a month ago, there were issues where Polymer is all in JavaScript, so they do this interop, like similar to like Java JNI, if you're familiar with Java and C. It's the same thing, Java interop, where you go from Dart all the way to JavaScript back and forth, talking to each other. And they've sort of been doing that, and there's some problems with like some of the event loops and bugs like that. But you do get the term, if you've ever heard of like hidden DOMs, basically. I forget what it's called. Like they call them Shadow DOM, and they also talk about Light DOM. Light DOM's your main website, and there's a lot of things they're trying to make work together. But that's definitely the direction it's going. So trying to get through some of these things. Yeah, they have a package manager. You can add in. You can get packages now and add them in, and add them into your project when you compile and look, it's like deploy, or I forget the terminology now, they've changed it a couple times, but you can bring packages in and do things off the shelf. It's really cool. The big thing they like about doing all these packages, and the big selling point, is they do something called tree shaking. It's where you have all these packages that you're using, and your main app, every app has a main function just like Java, and they will throw away code that's not referenced, and it won't be part of your delivery, or like your assembly that you would actually, your JavaScript assembly, if you convert it to JavaScript that you actually push out on the web.
So that's one of kind of the main features of Dart, is that the language allows you to specify things
Right.
tightly enough that it can actually know which parts of the code aren't being used, whereas in JavaScript, everything's so loose and dynamic that it could never know
It
until
can
runtime.
never follow it, exactly, and that is a huge selling point. I mean, there's been so many people that work in JavaScript, and they try to make their libraries a certain size to make it work, and you get rid of that whole problem right there just by saying, hey, use what you like, the rest of it won't be referenced, it'll be thrown away.
So for package dependencies and stuff,
Same thing
are
happens
they
with those.
is that with Gradle, or it's their own system?
I think it's their own system. I don't think it's like Maven or Gradle or anything like that. I use it, it works. I don't know the actual technical backend. It's all in their IDE too. It's kind of like one ecosystem. When they're trying to make things simple, they're trying to restrict, all these different components. Here's the standard IDE, and they try to they try to reduce a lot of the features to make, this is how we want you to develop, this is your workflow we want you to become trained to do. And you can download the IDE, Dart.lang and play with it.
The packages and dependencies, is that only when you're compiling to JavaScript, or does that apply
That's all-
when you're running in the VM as well?
That's always,
Okay.
either way. At the same time, you don't have to throw away the extra code. You can do your deploy, and you can keep everything too. It's just like an extra like optimization flag. So the cool thing is, if we have this class point, you see these getX, setX. Well, basically, you can write your code of just an X basically somewhere here, and later on you can add a getter and setter, and then add a logic to your system without breaking anyone's code, without deprecating the X field or something and saying, hey, use the getter and setter in a comment. You can actually at any time you want add in, and the same thing for the array operator.
So in the code, there's really ... or there's something there.
What do you mean? Like, oh no, something's there.
Okay.
You would add your own logic, right? You would not write ... unless, yeah. So there's factories. I haven't really used a lot of factories, but the idea is most people that use the factory pattern is to like cache objects and make it so that when people do like a new object instead, it will go through and find a previous version of it and return that. Your constructors can have names just like Java. Well, actually, not like Java. Java, you can't have names. You'd have to use a factory pattern. But so it's server-side programming and the JavaScript interoperability, but it's not seamless interoperability. There's still a bridge. Yeah. Import. So everything's, I guess I really, if I had some of my code in front of me, I could explain some of these better. But okay, so here's an example of a bunch of different libraries as of like probably 3 weeks ago. And the only ones I've used in here, I guess Stream, that'd be if you wanted to do a server-side web server. Actually, the one I used they don't have here, but they have some Google things, Google OpenAuth, and so crypto. I've done my own though. I don't know. But you can basically get all these cool libraries out of the box, and I have to re-implement code. This is an example of the actual website. If you go to pub.dartlang, you can create your own packages, and you can do other people's packages. And most people, their packages, I think they refer to GitHub. Like here, there's a homepage GitHub, so you can go look at their code and do your normal, I guess, Git things to try to push changes into their actual package. So as you know, this guy talking about the Google Reader. I don't know if you're familiar with the Google Reader thing, but he's gonna now. Well, okay, so. I'm sure, has anyone ever looked at like websites, the actual source? If you source on a website, you generally get this massive long divs everywhere. And the idea is to actually break this into components where each one of these, basically these subtrees, would be its own ecosystem, its own tree, and you wouldn't get collisions when you do select all index with a certain value, because what would happen is you'd have a shadow tree, and then a shadow tree, and then a shadow tree, and they're sort of their own ecosystems. When you do CSS query selectors, you only find the things in that shadow tree, and that's sort of one of the ideas they're trying to push here with this.
So are those like made up tags?
This right here.
On the right,
Uh,
like, message and subject and summary?
Right.
Those like HTML5 made up tags?
Yeah.
That are basically replacing the divs, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, those are custom HTML elements that are web components.
Yeah, the web, and they're replaced, but you would write it a little differently than this, but that's the general idea. In like,
So that's where the shadow DOM comes into play, right? So
that's where the shadow DOM.
probably have like some JavaScript code that will say, take that summary tag, turn it into a chunk of HTML, and that chunk of HTML will become like a separate little DOM tree. that is not part of the main document, and you have to, then there are methods to navigate into that and manipulate that HTML separate from the rest of the document.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard process though, going down the shadow tree process, because initially we run into stumbling blocks where, hey, I want to have my own CSS. Well, you have a style sheet for your website. All of a sudden, all your shadow DOMs aren't styled, and you have to import the CSS into the shadow DOM. And so there's all these little hacks that they're trying to iron out to make this whole idea work well. That's why in most of my work, I've just been using Dart as more of a JavaScript replacement. I haven't been doing all the Polymer and web component stuff. But the beautiful thing about the web components is eventually you can like include like a YouTube component, and YouTube styling will come in there, and it won't interfere with your site. And you can basically pass around these native sites and build them into components and build things out of them. So like each component has its own HTML page, has its own. That's the way they structure it right now. I guess this is more developer tools where you can. I guess there's an option somewhere you can say, hey, show Shadow DOM, and then you can click open on the Shadow DOM tags in your Google developer tools and actually look at the Shadow DOM. And this is more about Polymer.dart. They're trying to take what Polymer's done and pull it into Dart. And I guess this is an example of that.
So is this almost like on an Android, like a fragment? I mean,
I haven't done a lot of Android, but what would be like a fragment in Android?
I guess it's sort of like what you're talking about. It's like its own little world within
Right.
the environment.
Yep, so like all the CSS selectors will stay inside that zone. All the styling will stay inside. If I import a CSS file or set styles or on tags, it'll stay in that zone. It won't leak to my other DOMs, or if I run JavaScript, it will only be able to see that little segment for that JavaScript.
So where are you writing like the template element? Where are you actually writing that?
This you would actually write this right inside the HTML. This all is in the HTML right here. It's just like similar to Angular. You can do this. You can do similar things to this right now in Angular. You can do similar things like this in Polymer if you were to use just the Polymer JS. But in this case, we're actually doing the same sort of things, but we're doing it with Dart. And here they're saying sources something.dart. Well, of course that's only going to work inside of the Chromium browser. That's for Dart. But you would also have another. Let's see, do they have it? No. You'd have another script tag here that says, hey, that my source is something.javascript, and this will work, if that makes any sense.
It's kind of confusing. So if I have like 4 of those elements within a page, I would need
Right.
4 different style sheets?
So you're not gonna really put 4 of these elements in a page. You're gonna have an HTML5 import, and then you're just gonna use these elements. They'll be defined in their own separate place.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that when you actually start doing, you'll figure it out. Unfortunately, I haven't done a lot of the Polymer elements. I was doing them, and before that it was called Web UI or something, and it was pre-Polymer, and there's just some things I didn't like about the flow, personally. So, but for a lot of developers, this is just awesome because they can iterate, they can get something out working in 12 hours, 24 hours, and it works, it's nice.
So you're talking about like having 4 my message elements in the page, right?
Well, no, you're just, okay, basically you would,
Well, I'm asking what his question was. So if you had 4 my message elements, the runtime would apply that template to each of those and create 4 kind of mini HTML documents which are all using the same style information. That way, right? Does that make sense?
I guess so, yeah. That could be a way of looking at it. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of answers because I have very little experience. I'll show you some stuff. I can try to get toward the end here. So this whole thing is the my messages element. I think there may be a pre-tag instead of my for the actual Dart. It might be like X or something, I'm not sure, to get the Polymer same exact behavior. So this is where you actually write your code in Dart to interface with the Polymer element. And I don't know all the syntax and terminology, but you can do is, basically see the annotation at custom tag my message, that basically refers to this guy up, this guy. My message is all the way up right here, like this guy, it refers to this guy right here, at the top here. So the cool thing is you write your logic here, and you can have people go through and the designer still modify the actual stuff in the HTML, and they can add rules into the actual interaction of the code.
So can you put Polymer elements in your Dart user interface editor now? And drag and
There's
drop
not
them?
a drag and drop user interface yet, nope. It's not like that yet, but I mean, you can use the user interface thing to actually, it'll shoot out HTML, you can probably copy paste right into your Dart project, but they aren't to that level yet where there's like a huge nice IDE, you can drag and drop components, never write code. Okay, so everything you're inside this Polymer element, we have a shadow root where we can query against that, and then the host.query, that's basically the white DOM, the stuff that's above you. And so kind of cool, you can go back and you can query both and add your logic, your traditional JavaScript logic if you choose.
What's host?
It's the enclosing. It's like parent, if you were thinking of it in terms of DOM, but they call it host. I don't know. They actually call it a couple different things. I think for a while there was no such thing as host. It was just query, and it was an implied host. But Dart just hit 1.0 maybe like a week or two ago, so up to that point it was changing every couple weeks. So this is mustache tags. We have count, and this will basically do a two-way binding to the count variable inside of your JavaScript class click counter. So down here you actually have your class. You put an annotation add observable. I don't know if you still have to do that. You probably do though. They keep giving that to us and then taking it away. But the cool thing is that this variable, it's aligned. We can change it anywhere in our logic, and it will be reflected in the actual display in the HTML. So I don't know what this is exactly. I can't even see this one.
So what about MVC? Dart's got the data, or Angular's got the data binding, everything, but it's also about
Right.
MVC having separate controllers, things like that. Is that done in Dart?
To a point, yeah, you'd have to sort of follow however Polymer wants you to do controllers. That'd all be in your Dart work though. Of course, you can always go with the Angular route and import that. The problem I have right now with the Polymer is there's this Java interoperability, and they have all this Dart, all this JavaScript that comes in, and you sort of lose the whole idea of tree shaking because you're bringing in you're dragging the entire Polymer JavaScript project with you. But hopefully that will be cleaned up as things go forward. Okay, so that's that presentation. Now, this is where Martin Ordasky, I guess, he's the guy that does Scala in Switzerland. And this is how he views Dart. This is where he positions it on his academic view of languages. So if you're like a C programmer, you'd probably enjoy some aspects of Dart, and you would probably not enjoy some aspects of it if you were really into Scala. And this is what he says about Dart in terms of a language. So you can write Dart typelessly, as in, not typelessly, but totally dynamically, where you don't have to say this is a string or this is an int or anything. And it'll run just like JavaScript. You can compile it and run it, and if you have problems, it'll blow up at runtime. So you don't have to put types on things. You can just do whatever you want. And some people criticize that in a language. They say, you call it unsoundness, and that's more like an academic term of languages. And he calls it fundamentally a hack, which I think is, that's not a bad thing to call a language. I mean, hacks are what you get things done.
JavaScript.
Yeah, exactly. You can view the whole act, doing, XML request and the whole JavaScript thing being a hack. So here's some example code. I decided to get some slides together. So this is method cascading that you can do in Dart. And you can see here I do get pause element. That'll do some query on the DOM to get me the element. Then I can do ... title and set that to pause. And that basically will access the field title in element E and change it and set its value to be pause. And then I can do on that same E that came out here, I can do classes, which is an array. So I access the array field in that element, classes, and then I can do two things on that array. I do remove success and add warning, and I do this all in one line. Then the next
That's
line.
just changing the classes.
Yeah, exactly. This is more low level as terms of like a JavaScript replacement. If you've ever done because you can write websites just pure JavaScript. You don't need jQuery or anything like that. And then this is just another line. I'm just showing method cascading, where normally you'd have to save the object E, and you have to do E dot title equals pause, and you have to do E dot classes remove, E dot classes add. Generally that'd be 4 or 5 lines, and here you can make it a little easier. It's a little harder to read and understand, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes very easy. And the cool thing is if you do ... you can do autocomplete. So that gets you right through it really fast.
So does the first dot get you anything? I guess the
There's
first
just a normal field, So if you would replace the first dot with 2 dots, and then after that, you would have the option of continuing the cascade and doing something again, or you can just do end line. Like here, I do ... add an end line. I can make this a 1 dot add at the top, at this third line here, and it'll be the same. It'll be functionally equivalent. So ... just says, hey, I can continue on if I want.
So the first dot references the object. The second dot, what is that reference?
It's more like a syntactical compiler thing where you the 2 dots. It's not like Java where you do dot and then you have you can do whatever you want. I can do another dot, and then it's not like and then you can't do 3 dots. It's like a compiler thing. It's from Smalltalk. I haven't done any Smalltalk, but it was kind of a popular language in the 90s. Maybe Brandon, you have anything to add on cascading? No.
Yeah, I mean, certain APIs, even within languages like Java, try to create this capability by having all of the methods return the object itself, so you can just keep adding more things onto it.
Yeah.
I think this basically kind of provides a language level equivalent to that doesn't require you to
Add in the
design your
returns.
APIs to
Yep.
enable that.
Next thing here, this is a field elements, I call it pits, and the cool thing is I can actually do what I call if you're familiar with Java, this is more like a C initialize alternative that you can do. And it's really cool. So the first time this thing is called, if I ever do, on these items, if I ever do get pits, it's actually static. So if I just do item dot, or I guess if I do unidentified item dot pits, it'll pop out and it will do the first time through it'll do a query select and it'll find me the pits element and return that. And then the next time this is invoked, it will return temp. This method will not be run again. If that makes any sense. And that's also with this whole parentheses here at the end. The cool thing is you can add a bunch of event listeners if you want to do this in more of a JavaScript format. You add all your event listeners there, and it's all sort of done behind the scenes. So, let's see. Commenting code. I hate commenting code. I had an internship where they made me write Java, comment everything in Java, and then comment everything in C. They had to do both styles because I was doing J and I between 2 systems. So they wanted me to write this huge object header in C, and then do this thing in Java. And ever since then, I've really hated commenting. I really like self-documenting code and things like that. So here is on the one side is Java, on the other side is kind of like the Dart way of thinking of how you should do commenting. I guess Google doesn't really like reading a lot of comments either, and they built their actual tools that will produce docs on your thing, just like Java docs, around this sort of design for comments. So dependency injection, this is actually pretty interesting. So here, when I do a new person, this is optional. This entire thing is optional. I do not have to pass in a connection factory. If I do not pass in a connection factory, it will then call new DB connection, which is going to return an object, and that's going to be placed right here. Actually, it's not going to call it. This is just going to be a dependency injection. It's going to be like a method. So if it's not going to call new DB connection until here. Right here is where this guy will be called, unless I passed in some other connection factory, in which case once I call save, it will then call the method then. So it's sort of like passing a method in, if that makes any sense. They call that dependency injection. Most people do this in Java with annotations, and then they go through and do reflection to actually make dependency injection work. But here it's part of the language. So here we have getters and setters. You can see you can add cool logic on your getter and setter. So on a rectangle, if you want to modify the rectangle, move it to right somewhere, and preserve its width and height, you can do some logic and return. This is get right. And if you want to set right, you can do some more logic, which would be just modifying the current left position. And here you can see the constructor is very simple. It's a one-line constructor, less boilerplate. Of course, everyone in Java would love to be able to do this.
So if you have a rectangle object, you can do like dot get right?
You don't do dot get right. So all you do is that rectangle object dot right. It's like a field access, but it's actually calling this method.
It knows it's like a getter and
Yeah, the behind the scenes, right? It's more like a dynamic language, so you have that freedom. It's not like ingrained what you have to do.
So dot right gives you the getter. Dot right passing in an argument does the setter.
You don't pass an argument, you do equals something.
So
All right,
dot
so
right
you
equals.
treat everything like it's all fields, but
Yep.
you can actually change your mind later on and put code so that it's not just doing a direct set. Okay.
Exactly. So later on, someone that's writing a library, if they wanted to change the left getter and setter, they can just add left getter and setter, and no one has to recompile their code. Well, people have to get the new code, but you don't have to make any code changes to anything that accesses this, which is a pretty large advantage, because most people go through and they initially design everything with getters and setters just so that they can preserve this ability, and then you get all this boilerplate, and you're reading all these lines of code. It's hard to understand. Well, here I wrote something, and this is something I really like. I do everything by hand, and I don't go by the Polymer way of doing things yet. I'm not convinced. So this is creating an HTML fragment, and here we have double quotes, and this is basically, this creates like a string builder. It's all part of the language. So this little equal sign ID, okay, we can read that. That's going to access a field ID that you can't see, and then here we have, that's a little confusing to understand. I can explain that later on. But the cool thing is here, I can do, I can call a variable and I can execute logic in here. It's kind of like a method in there. And I can, increment the value. I can do toString and pass that back out here. I'm not doing any two-way binding or any of that magic. I'm doing it. I do everything myself. But it's cool to have these language features in there, where if somebody like me wants to, get really dirty and actually write out all the code, I can do that. And I can create this string much easier compared to anything you do in Java. If you've ever tried to do multi-line strings in Java, it's not fun. And the cool thing is this, using double quotes 3 times, you can use single quotes 3 times also, and get the same exact, yeah.
What does it do? What's the triple quote?
It basically tells you it's going to be a multi-line string, and it tells the parser, hey, to find my endpoint, I need to find 3 in a row.
Okay.
And it's kind of like an uncommon delimiter. I guess that's probably a way to think of it if you've done compiler design. But makes it much easier. But see here, I can put double quotes inside my string, and it doesn't break it. I don't have to escape them. I don't have to do plus and then call a method and then write my method somewhere else. It's all in line. Makes it much easier to read the flow and do things, do logic. You can do ternary operations, everything. What else do we got here? So here's a little thing you got to keep in mind about integer precision. Basically, when you're running JavaScript, you understand that you are 2 to the 53 most of the time, and you're in Chrome, I think Firefox, probably IE also. When you're writing code for the Dart VM, if you're using integer types, longs and stuff, it's 2 to the 64. It's normal, and that you're used to if you're doing C and C++. So if you're like coming at this from like Java or C++ or C, it's kind of like a quick gotcha. If you write all this code, doing all these encodings and stuff, and then you run it, then you deploy in JavaScript, nothing's working. Let's keep in mind when you're doing bit shifts or anything like that, which most people don't. This is about the strings again. Here you can see a triple, single quote, and there's the double. And then that's that. Now I'm going to go to this guy here. So we did constructors, name constructors. Here's kind of a factory constructor idea where you have a cache of different objects for whatever reason, and you want to make it so that you're not creating all these extra objects, and you want to just keep returning this guy. I haven't used it myself, but I imagine they do it in a lot of libraries, and it's great to have the ability because in Java, people add these things after the fact, and they change everyone's code. It's really cool because, yeah. Let's see. So you can do kind of cool things, messages where, then you can have like a filter right here, a predicate, you do to list. You can do all sorts of things like that. This can be one line methods. You can sort of do that in Java, but doing it like this, I think it makes it a little easier for the compiler to parse through your code. It doesn't have to do a lot of and then back off. So does anyone have any questions? Because I have 2 more things to go over, and I don't know my time limits. And of course, talk about dependency injection here. I already showed you those little pieces. So there's no triple equals. You're used to JavaScript. Futures are cool. So you can chain these things together. You can do future.then, and then you can catch errors. And you'll catch an error out of any of those futures. Makes it a little easier to do things. And there's a whole other article on there if you're really interested in futures and callbacks, how to make them easier, how to handle errors when you have one future is doing a web request and your next future is upon that web request do a web your client side browser's I think it's web store, or I don't know. However you access the HTML5 data store, I don't know what it's called. If you chain all these callbacks, it becomes very difficult to handle exceptions where things break down, things don't work, and you can have unified ways of handling the errors.
Is that like promises?
It's like promises, yeah. I talked about the numerical computation. So I'll talk more about, I don't know everything about boxing and unboxing. I would prefer having a language where I can actually pass primitive data types. I really like that about Java. It's really helped me a lot. You can't do that in Dart though. Everything's an object that you pass around. And some people don't like that, some people do like that. Makes it easier, obviously, to do a lot of things I showed you when you have those rules set in stone for your language. But what they do to try to alleviate the huge amount of expense is they'll do some optimizations where if you're doing these integer additions, it'll bring it into registers first when you're running in the Dart VM. And it will then, so basically if you make these long methods and you're doing like a game or something, you can kind of plug into faster things by doing all these gets first and then having everything as registers instead of wrapped objects, and doing all your computations, then doing your setters back to objects. Of course, I'm not familiar with, if you're familiar with Java and doing like really fast Java, I don't know all the different rules that are over like method length, things like that in the Dart VM. No one's really written any books about optimizing for the Dart VM. Then again, there's not really a lot of actual users right now of the Dart VM. So we talk about some of their bit shift optimizations. performance tips. There's a couple in here if you actually do any like scientific computing and you want to do that in the Dart VM.
What is SMI? I keep saying SMI.
Yeah, I was reading that today too. They call it, means rhymes of pi. I think it's just a small integer is what they describe SMI. And what I think they do is, when they talk about this optimization, they actually look at the field value and say, hey, is this within the scope of an integer? And then they'll put it into a registry. But I imagine if you deploy this on like a 64-bit computer, it would not be doing that. But I don't know. I don't know how they map the registries. But there's another article talking about, some of the good articles are pretty old ones. If you go to dart.lang and look at docs and look at articles, there's a lot of articles about why they made certain decisions. They talk about why they didn't make a bytecode language, which, you know, I'm mixed on. And they talk about, here they talk about optional typing. And this is sort of like how the Scala guy, you know, criticizes it. You know, it's optional typing where you can just write code and things will work, and it'll give you warnings when you write your code more like optionally without types. Like obviously this is not going to work at runtime. You can't add 2 points and say, or I guess points. It'll give you a warning here, but I think if you run it at runtime, it probably won't. It might blow up. I don't know. I haven't run it myself, but it might blow up if you try to do n+10 or something. Then it might blow up. But here there might not be any problem at all until you do n+10. Like actually try to treat it as an integer. The generics, they talk about using dynamic. Everything's a dynamic. If you don't give in, I don't know if anyone's done generics in Java, but if you don't pass in a type for the generic, it's just going to be implicit dynamic. There's just some rules. If you do so there's is like instance of. That's what is. There's also, if you want to do casting, you would do something as something, and that would cast the type. If you're doing object-oriented.
Question on arrays.
Yeah.
If you have like a map,
Right.
you said you didn't have to declare, right? But if I want to create an array of maps, I mean, how would that work? Would I just do the brackets or actually call it an array?
If I brought my ID with me, it's my brother's computer has VGA, but I could definitely show you a lot of those things. What's cool about Dart is they try to force you to stay with a type. So if you declare your array, this is of integer to string, right? And if you it forces you into that type matrix. And what's cool about that is when you deploy in JavaScript and the array is only integer to string or something like that, it'll actually implement the array, you know, in an optimized way. It'll force that type upon you. Whereas in JavaScript, if you're just writing along, you say, I decided I've been using integers a lot. I'm going to put in a couple keys that are string to string or something, which you can do in JavaScript. What happens is when you deploy that on Chrome, it'll go back through and de-optimize the array. It'll create a different type, and you lose all your optimizations of using actual like structured into whatever. But I think there's two types. I think it's list and map. And I'm not sure exactly how they end up being in JavaScript, but I don't know if that answers your question.
It's a bit confusing to think, because I see it like declare it as a map, but
Right.
then you said that you could have an array and you don't have to declare the type.
It's like an implicit map. So like up here,
So it'd probably be just an array of objects. So you could get anything at any position.
it'll create it into being dynamic. Yeah.
So you just like in JavaScript where you never have any guarantees about what you're going to find at any position in that array.
It'll run until you click fetch, right?
Yeah. I could probably answer your question when I'm at my house with my computer, and I can drill through pretty much anything then. And any more? So I'll give you some more things about Dart, things I don't like. Everything has to be generally single-threaded. There are ways of doing, pass by, send a message to another thread. They call them like isolates maybe or something. But it's the same thing as if you were doing like Erlang or like any sort of actor model language where you're passing, you're sending a thing to something else back and forth. So there's not really a huge stringent memory model. if you're like used to C++ or Java, that you have to keep in mind when you're programming. And of course, that makes it ideal because, browsers are single-threaded, so it makes it very easy to convert to JavaScript. It very much aligns with that use case. Aligns with Node too, if you do Node development or PHP. But if you do like any really advanced server-side in Java, that's kind of weird. There's like a mismatch if you really like multi-threading and doing all these crazy compare and swap operations and stuff like that.
So the dark answer to shared memory concurrency is don't do it.
There is no shared memory. I mean, you can make globals that are constant, but beyond that, no.
So do they do everything asynchronous, or is there ability to do synchronous, like requests and things, since it's on a single thread?
I'm pretty sure everything's like an object where you have a mailbox and it's like a queue in front of every actor. I'm pretty sure that's how they implement isolates. That's something you'd only really start caring about if Chrome would start allowing. But at this point, most people that use it just deploy to JavaScript. They don't try to add in any threading. And then
Because JavaScript is single-threaded, you
Yep.
have to be asynchronous with everything, but
Yep.
Dart is
well,
also pretty much single-threaded.
yeah, exactly. It's pretty much single thread. We have callbacks, and it works fine doing that. I of course like having threads and doing all these things. I don't know if you remember this, Brandon, but we're talking about the callbacks and how Google was doing in our labs, how they were actually doing the messages back and forth. The way they were doing that is they were doing an IE frame, and there's using an IE frame, and then you have a different thread in your frame that you're able to use to go off and do the messages back and forth. Then you can pass by value back to the other guy and synchronize via that. But there isn't really much in that for Dart in terms of that. A big use case for Dart and people focused on is making video games. Basically, doing a lot of Java and I think it's like WebGL or something, stuff like that. So people that are writing games would, they're looking more and more at Dart. I think there's been people that won some contests using Dart to write their games a little easier.
So what are some of the main best production
My-
apps in Dart right now?
There are not a lot of production apps. I mean, you can go to the website, they'll talk about some maps things, people that integrate maps into like census data or something, but beyond that, I think there is one company that says they're slowly rewriting every one of their pieces into Dart, and they're living with both JavaScript and Dart, and as they're chugging along, they're just rewriting pieces in Dart. Of course, naturally, you're making a jump. If you're going into Dart, I guess some of the hangups are IE compatibility. You have to be running pretty much like IE 9 or 10 now. Some people still have to write apps that are like IE 7 compliant or things like that. And you have those same hangups if you did Angular to a point. But you could still try to get some compatibility that you can't get in Dart. I'm trying to think of some other hangups. Well, you're kind of stuck with the Google ecosystem. You don't know how long, if they just cancel the project or whatnot. But at the same time,
It is open source, right?
it is open source, BSD license. You can pick up the language, compile it, change it, and go forward like that.
What about collaboration? Can you get access to their repository, start pushing changes?
I think most of the time that's going to be a lot of their libraries linked to like a GitHub homepage, and you can do your normal things via GitHub. Or you can just create your own library. There's not it's kind of a small community, which is cool because you can actually, it's kind of like how Java was in its early days, where you can actually get a hold of a Sun engineer. It's the same thing. You can get a hold of a Google engineer, go make a post on the mailing list. Someone's going to read it in 24 hours if it's actually a valid thing, or they're going to close you out. You can get direct feedback from a Google engineer, which is different than a lot of other Google products right now, where you can't exactly get an engineer instantly. But,
Is it exposed like JavaScript?
well, it compiles to JavaScript, so you can view that source code and look at that and read it. Right now, yes, so if there's no Dart obfuscators or anything like that, if you're concerned about if you write your code and you're doing your Dart deploy, I don't know if they will convert your Dart into unreadable Dart script, but I imagine that will be along the path here.
So if I write it in Dart
Right.
and I like deploy it,
Mhm.
it'll actually convert to JavaScript and then browse.
Right, so in the IDE you do, there's a way to do like right-click deploy and as a web browser, and it'll push everything into some other folder, folder. Maybe I can do an extra talk and be better prepared next time, and I can actually show you how to navigate the IDE, which is, that's kind of like the first thing a beginner has to do is install the IDE and navigate that and create a project and do all those things.
I have some good videos on this.
Yeah, there's plenty of videos. You just go to the Dart link. I imagine there's simple, pretty easy tutorials to go through to get through things. But we didn't even have deploy to JavaScript until maybe 6 months ago. So that's kind of how new it was in terms of doing it easily in a GUI environment. There's all these command line things that you'd run before to actually get something that would run in a web browser.
So can you go to GitHub and fork the whole Dart repository?
I think Dart's all on Google Code, but you can fork a lot of the libraries that come off the shelf. They're all written in Dart. You can fork those and do whatever you want. I think there's an example, GitHub, all these Dart examples. And you can go and pull those off and play with those. In terms of the actual Dart runtime VM, that's all in Google Code. It's all under that system. And the bug ticket system is all part of Google Code. It's not, so it's kind of separate from GitHub. Go.
When you compile your Dart project to
Yep.
JavaScript, does it compile all the third-party libraries and everything to a
Yep.
single file?
Yep, it'll tree shake that all and give you one file.
Just one JavaScript file, you
Yep.
embed it?
Yep.
Can you target what browsers you want to support, like a minimum level?
Unfortunately, the file you're going to get is going to support every browser that they support at this point. So you are going to have, if you want to say, I only want to support Chrome, you're still going to have if Firefox, if Opera. That's still going to be in the code, unfortunately, if you're like that concerned about your CSS.
But if like
selectors.
Google Dart, they drop IE9 support,
Well,
you'll stop, you'll compile
you're
your
right.
next
Yeah,
project.
we're not
and
doing
use
anything
IE9
Microsoft
support.
anymore. Yeah, that's a problem for you. And I mean that's also a problem too. Is that I've hated is the Dart IDE. They will only let you update. So they want you to. It's like Google Chrome. They want you to constantly upgrade their IDE. If you try to do something and it's like, oh, your thing's out of date, they want you to upgrade it. So it's good and bad. It's bad for the power user, but it's probably good for most developers that come on their ticket system and complain about bugs. They're like, oh, well, what version are you running? Well, you can automatically assume that they're running something pretty recent. There's trade-offs, but
And can you reverse the JavaScript file back into Dart code if you lose your Dart
there
project?
isn't a no. In fact, what keeps changing is the Dart to JavaScript is like a moving target. They keep coming up with new. They have all these benchmarks basically that they're optimizing around. So they show you like how fast does this JavaScript file work, and then this is how fast it runs. We have it. We write it in Dart and then move it to JavaScript.
So what can you say about the benchmarks? I know I've seen some that were pretty impressive, that Dart was running certain operations much faster.
Yeah, the benchmarks are very good. I think they have some people that came from the V8 team working on this, and of course, stuff that you write in pure Dart is going to beat out JavaScript, obviously, because you have a different VM and you have cooler things. Writing code, you can probably still handwrite JavaScript code and come out ahead in most cases. But it's going to take you a lot more time, and unfortunately a lot of optimizations on browsers are moving targets. So it's kind of cool to write code in Dart, and then you also get some of their knowledge of how they would write it in JavaScript that'll perform the best for you. It's much more enjoyable to write code in Dart than JavaScript, especially debugging it. For me, coming from a Java, I've done Java for 8 years. So I really enjoy Dart for my use cases. Of course, it's not best for everyone. When you have all these JavaScript libraries you want to use, then you're sort of stuck unless you want to do the interop, which you can do. But a lot of things I think are going to be starting to be moved over to the Dart world in terms of libraries, and there's more convergence between Polymer, Angular, and Dart going forward, and wherever Chrome's going, because they're constantly talking with the Chrome development team about where they're going with that.
What about spriting of images? Does it have any support for that?
See, I haven't written any games, so, but I imagine it does. I mean, I've seen people that just I mean, the guy that wrote Minecraft, I forget his name, but he was playing a Dart, like, I think his name, I don't know his name. He's playing in Dart, okay, yeah, he's playing in Dart like a week ago. He put up a video of him working in it, and then his little code that's running in the browser. It's a very fast refresh cycle, you know, you hit refresh and the browser's there and you can see the changes. And of course, when you start doing things like that, you're going to be probably doing callbacks to some sort of CSS3 thing to paint the sprite. You wouldn't do all your painting directly with, you wouldn't build your image in JavaScript or anything. You'd be calling it web GL, things like that.
I've been playing with JavaScript about 3 months now. Is it worth carrying with that, or should I switch to?
You know, if it's working for you, it depends how much work have you put in your JavaScript project.
Not huge amount.
Okay. It also depends on, you know, are you just doing it for yourself as a hobby project, or is it for like someone? Is it like for? There's all these little trade-offs you have to think of. You know, if you're doing it in Dart, it's probably easier to find a JavaScript developer to work with you than a Dart developer right now. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of synergies to. You can learn both at the same time. There's a lot of cross, you know, similarities. So there's no harm in downloading the IDE and playing around with the samples. You download the samples and add in a printf or something, or I guess it's println or log.println or something, and see how things work. Put breakpoints, blow it up. You know, that's probably the best way to start off. I think there's probably a GitHub Dart examples. You can probably Google that and just download that into your thing and play with it.
So if I'm working in the IDE,
Yeah.
and I'm using maybe Python or PHP for the back end,
Okay.
is it all gonna work, I mean, simultaneously, you know, if I make some changes in Dart and I refresh the page, everything's gonna show up, or?
Well, if you're writing your backend, you would. When I did it, I had, you know, Eclipse. I'll do a Java backend, and I have my Dart IDE. It would be separate IDEs, and I would do my changes here, save, rerun, and then do my changes here. So I would develop both at the same time. I know some people have like a Node.js workflow where I think they do both at the same time, right together, because it's all JavaScript. But that's how I did it. I do one at a time, and then.
Okay, so but if I write it in Dart,
Right.
it'll compile it into JavaScript
Right.
for all the browsers, so it wouldn't.
Right. Well, when you're developing, you get this really fast refresh cycle because you're developing to a Dart VM. You don't have to compile it. It doesn't have to go through the whole compilation and make it into a JS file for you to then execute in your local web browser. You can at any time in your project. You'll be able to right-click and do run in Dartium or something, and then you can do right-click, run in web browser, and it'll just bring up your default web browser after it's done the whole compiling, and have that same page. So you can kind of compare both at the same time as you're going forward. If you think that you're writing Dart code that doesn't work for whatever reason, like I explained, the integer differences, you know, things like that you want to work out. But when you do run in browser, it'll build everything, put it into a folder, and you can then take that folder and FTP it to your host or whatever, and get the same thing going. The only thing to keep in mind is make sure you have both script tags. They probably explain this, but there's two script tags. There's a Dart script tag and a JavaScript script tag, and most people, when they write their HTML file, you do your HTML editing inside the Dart IDE also. I probably didn't explain that. So you have your JS files there and your HTML files, and you're doing everything front-end related right there. And as you're saving either one of those files, you can see the changes in the browser. Yeah.
Is there enough in the base Dart SDK to replace jQuery? If you wanted to just
Oh yeah,
do your whole
that
project in Dart and compile it?
exactly. Yep. The CSS selectors are there. It's been a moving target, but they're finally there. They have a replacement for Delegate if you're familiar with delegates, and that's all there. I prefer it myself. So.
And does it compile all that to JavaScript, or does it actually like use jQuery?
Oh, and it does not use jQuery. No, it compiles it all to pure JavaScript. There's no jQuery. Just messes with the DOM. Yep. I don't know if that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
There we go.